Rất cảm ơn cái bài trình bày của tiến sĩ Hùng về tổng quan về BIM cũng như là kinh nghiệm triển khai về BIM tại một số nước. Thì rõ ràng khi chúng ta ở trong cái giai đoạn rất là sơ khai, cái việc học tập kinh nghiệm triển khai của các nước rất quan trọng. Thì chính vì thế hôm nay chúng tôi có mời đây ông Mark Tung, là chuyên gia về BIM của Singapore. Thì ông Mark có trên 18 năm kinh nghiệm trong làm việc trong lĩnh vực xây dựng. Tôi có một cái lưu ý là ở đây thì chúng ta có bài trình bày của hai chuyên gia từ nước ngoài, thì bài trình bày của các ông sẽ là tiếng Anh, và chúng tôi có cái màn chiếu tiếng Việt ở bên cạnh. Tuy nhiên là cái việc dịch thì chúng tôi sẽ không dịch từng slide hoặc từng câu một, vì như vậy nó sẽ rất là dài. Thì chúng tôi sau mỗi bài trình bày chúng tôi sẽ tóm gọn những cái ý chính trong cái bài trình bày của các cái diễn giả.
Of myself. I'm from Tekla, Southeast Asia office, and I'm very happy today to be here to share with you about the policies and BIM implementation policies in Singapore. I do not represent FECA, but this is just for my own experience. I've been involved in the BIM steering committee from 2009 to 2013. Some of the information here I provided is already been covered, as mentioned by Dr. Hung, so that will I will not mention those things. Instead, I will go more in depth into some of the other information. As mentioned by Dr. Hung, these are some of the countries that has already mandated BIM by partially or fully in the government sectors. And so today I'll touch a bit more about Singapore, but just to notice that the areas of whereby BIM is mandated is more the Finland, Norway, US, UK, in this part of the world, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Singapore. So again, this is something familiar. So exactly what did Singapore mandate for the government, public sector? So I think you have seen this slide just now. Dr. Hung mentioned about the mandatory BIM e-submission. Actually, the e-submission, there's a name for it called a CORNET, which actually was set up some time back since 2004 to facilitate the submission of the status submission through a digital way, so that developers, consultants do not need to submit to all the various departments, but just submit to one portal, which is the CORNET, so that the information all be collated and automatically administrated. So this will improve the efficiency. But with the BIM, now they are requiring everybody to submit in the BIM way through this CORNET. And of course, this is to give the drive the adoption of the BIM, because now all the consultants need to have some BIM done in order to do the e-submission, and without that, they can't actually go ahead with their work. So I'm not going to go into the detail of this, but I think what was not mentioned was that the public sector, there was a advisory note given out to all the public sector agencies like Housing Board, Land Transport Authority, and various other agencies who actually built some government related or public sector projects, encouraging them on directing them to say, please, for projects that are more than $10 million, please have BIM been specified or consider BIM in your tender. So that is really like what we call having the public sector taking the lead. And this is in fact the strategy number one in the whole BCA BIM roadmap, which consists of 4, which I think you have seen it just now at the previous presentation. And this was to address the lack of demand for BIM. Public sector taking the lead and having the BIM e-submission to be compulsory. So just a very quick note about the strategy. Singapore is quite straightforward. We address what are the key challenges, and the strategies are those that are targeting those key challenges. And I'll go more in depth into that in subsequent slides. Okay, so the second challenge was to address the entrenched 2D practice. I mean, we have been using 2D for very, very long, and there's just this anxiety, this concern about how do I move, how it's going to affect me, and what to do, where to go. And so one of the key strategies was to address all these concerns, all these resistance, and one of the things some of the things that came up with was that we need to have BIM guides, we need to have standards, we need to have libraries. Are these necessary? If necessary, can we build them so that we can provide to the industry so that they can do not have this concern anymore? But of course, to have all those things done, including the mandating all the policies of having all the government agencies to specify BIM and having all the mandatory submission and even standards, there need to be somebody behind who is actually steering these initiatives and creating all the libraries, the standards, and helping those early adopters to start. And this is what the people that are behind it. There was a BIM steering committee that has been set up. This BIM steering committee is a very high-level committee. The chairman is actually the deputy chairman former deputy chairman of the BCA board, and some members of the BCA, which is the Building Construction Authority of Singapore, board members. And in the committee itself, they have representatives from all the various government public sector agencies, Land Transport Authority, Housing, Ministry of Education, Singapore Land Authority, such and such. And also representative from the industry, Association of Engineers, Consulting Engineers, you have the Singapore Institute of Architects, you have the Real Estate Developer Associations, and Building Smart Singapore. Everybody is represented there in the same committee so that everybody can have their fair share of their views before the policy is being put on the table for discussion. Of course, the steering committee gives the so-called the directions and give that support to have all the resources needed to move things forwards. But effectively, there's still a lot of groundwork to be done. And that's where we have this CCIT. This CCIT stands for Center for the Construction IT. It is part of BCA as well. And in this department, actually, you have all the BIM people who knows more about BIM in this department, and they are the one who actually drives, do the hard work behind the background of helping the industry to adopt BIM. Things like they have organized study trips for the committee itself, go Finland, for example, to study about the BIM, IFC, and things like that, open BIM. And they are the one who organize all the trainings for the to create awareness programs, many awareness programs to address and keep educating the people. They even have hand-holding sessions, yeah, for those people who want to start, who are ready to start, so that when you have more success and everybody else knows that it can be done, to give the confidence to the industry. And of course, last but not least, is also to start on the BIM standard and BIM guides, right? And I'll touch more on that later on. And of course, as the discussion goes on for the BIM steering committee, they will come across many areas that they say, well, we need more so-called deep, in-depth study, and that's where work groups are formed with some of the members involved from the steering committee, but involving CCIT as well as industrial people from the industry to participate, to give their points of view, so that when it's time to roll out, it'll be faster because they already had agreed to those so-called guidelines, BIM, or whatever it is in a sense. So some of the things they are currently, like what I'm aware of, there are like 3 that was done, that was set up previously. The first one that was set up was what we call the BIM guide workbook. Actually, they wanted to start with the standard, but we felt that at time that because we are starting something new, so maybe it's good to start a guide so that people won't be so tense up with a standard. Because standard means you have to comply, and that is quite a scary thing for some people. So we say, all right, we'll start a BIM guide so they give you some flexibility and also give us some room over the years when we mature. We can learn and we can fine-tune, and eventually that become to be rolled up to be a standard. And like they have done like Singapore BIM guide, Singapore BIM, the essential BIM guide for contractors, for consultants, and things like that. That was built over the years. This will help the various people, even developers, to know how to specify BIM, what not to specify, what to specify, and things like that. And there's also another work group that was set up because of this issue about IP, intellectual property, issues about legal, contractual, which I think is faced by everybody, and there's this big question mark over everybody's head in a sense. So this was set up to discuss involving all the industry people, involving even legal, to look at how can we clarify all those things, and once and for all clarify so that everybody, once it's clear, everybody is comfortable, everybody is willing to put it onto the tender. And some of the things they have done was that they clarified things like who's in intellectual property, who does it belong to, who owns it, and what is the liability when you share your model, right? And that was put into what we call a particular condition, which is part of the contract. Whenever you have a contract with either your services, construction services or consulting services for public sector as well as for private, so that this is included in, so people is clear. Okay, this is what I'm going in with for BIM. There's also another area discussed, which by saying that, well, now with consulting engineers, with the consultants doing BIM, more work is done upfront because of your modeling, and actually, if you've done it right, your drawings actually is more or less automated. Your detailed design is more or less there, so the effort is like more upfront than distributed equally. And there was a discussion about maybe we should review the payment schedule over that service that is provided. And also there's a question asked about what happens if the developer asks me to do everything under the sky for the BIM. So there should be some guideline on saying that, well, if they're asking you just to do BIM, to get drawings out, to collaborate and things like that, should be a norm. That should be part of your current fee. But if you're asking you to do more than that, then that should be considered value-add services, and developers, owners should be prepared to pay more for those kind of services. So these are some of the guidelines that was put forward recommended by the work group. And last but not least, we have the last work group, which is actually formed up of various BIM forum, so we have BIM forum group from contractors, BIM manager forum for architects, BIM manager forum for MEP, consulting engineers and architects. So each of them will help to set up and give their inputs about the essential guide for their own fellow members, contractor for contractors, architects for architects, as a guide again, as well as how they should work with other parties. So this BIM manager forum meets regularly, and I mean recently they have completed their first draft of first version of their essential guide for their various disciplines. Alright, so with all those so-called impediments, those kind of things to clear the road for them, so that everybody now is more comfortable with BIM, they know what is it about in terms of business sense. Now it's about, we still short of people. There's not many people, even if I want to start a BIM project, I need people who knows how to model BIM, who know to coordinate BIM, who knows what about BIM, how to manage it, how to specify it, and things like that. That's when the third strategy comes in, whereby we have to quickly, they had to quickly beef up all the people, more people who can do BIM. And that's where we call the strategy called the BIM capability and capacity. And under the leadership of BCA, they have come up with this blueprint of this what you call a capability and capacity framework, whereby they address actually two parties, mainly people who are already working in the industry, and those people who are still starting. I mean, we have to plug the hole. We can have people coming in still trying to learn in the industry. So in the polytechnic, whatever schools and whatever universities, it has been they work with university to include that into their curriculum. And also for those who are graduating for that year, at the time they were given intensive course, so that when you go into the industry, they just need to, if needed, just stick to the modeling skills certification course, and up and running. Right, and for those in the existing working, maybe they're drafting, maybe they're doing engineering. Of course, they may have gone for product training by any other vendors, but they have an opportunity to go to this BIM modeling skill certification course, and with some experience, they could move up to a BIM manager training and certification course. Of course, if they are already a management position in CAD, they could easily go up to the BIM manager training and certification. So these in blues are those courses that have been set up like by BCA Academy. I mean, there are also other associations who have started to set up their own training courses. So just for reference, for example, these are some of the courses that they set up for certification for modeling, specialist diploma in BIM for the BIM managers, for example. And this is the one for the polytechnic and the universities, all the things that they do, awareness seminars, competitions, and things like that. Just to create that awareness that BIM is going to be there when you graduate. So be ready and be prepared. So the last but not least, when someone start to do BIM for their company, definitely there will be investment needed for a start. There's learning curve to be done. You may take some time before you recoup back your productivity gain or your benefits. And for the time being, you need to invest. And that decision normally takes a little bit longer while, and so just to make it more sweet and easier for them to make that decision to come early, to adopt BIM earlier, we have something and incentivize the BIM adopters, and that comes under the funding, whereby under the government or in the whole economy, in the government, there's really a productivity fund, but under the construction, we have the construction productivity and capability fund. I think, if I'm not wrong, it's about the bucket of about 250 million. But of course, this is overall, includes mechanization, automation, and any other initiative or any methods that reduces labor-intensive methods. Of course, obviously, BIM has been identified as one of those to qualify for this fund, and been set aside some money so that companies who wish to start BIM, they could apply for the fund, which they can get up to 50% of the funding for their software, hardware, and for their training. And this is just to encourage people to come in early. Of course, this funding will not be there forever, so it's better for them to come in earlier. Okay, so after all this thing done and said, what's the current status? I do not have the detailed information of the current adoption rate, but as reported in last year during the August 2013, where we had the productivity week, we had like in 2009 about 20% of adoption rate, and during last year August 2013 it's gone up to 65%, and I'm sure that by now it might have gone up some more in the sense. During that time last year in August 2013, again the international panel of experts. I'm sorry I didn't mention that just now during the org chart. There's this international panel of experts which makes up of all the experts from many of the other countries, like from UK, from US, Stanford University, from Korea, and some leading local industry leaders, as well as BCA board and CEO, form part of this international panel of experts, where they come every year to review and to discuss about the BIM roadmap of Singapore and in general the overall implementation of BIM worldwide. So when they were around last year, the roadmap for Singapore has worked well to help to get people to get started using BIM. So it's very effective in getting many people come on board. Okay, but do take note that the key value of BIM lies not only in the mass adoption, but in enabling the collaboration between the different project parties, as well as to come together to make new solutions and to better manage the risk. Right? So, and also, as mentioned by Dr. Heng as well, there's already internationally, the construction industry is really moving towards re-engineering its processes. And they said that it's well for the next stage of the roadmap to widen the application in the following areas. They first of all look at how to transform the construction procurement processes through greater collaboration working. So currently most of the procurement processes is like design, bid, build, and it's quite segmented in a sense. So how to bring them closer and work together. Things like integrated project delivery is one example. How to bring the constructability study, how to make good use of the knowledge of the prefabrication or the constructability upfront into the design phase, which is the essence of BIM, is to do all the thing in the design as much as possible so that it will reduce the cost of any errors or changes during construction. So how to do that? And also, of course, the other essence of BIM actually is about looking at how to have that life cycle benefit, how to have a BIM at the end that whereby you can use it for your operation and maintenance of the building and the assets. That again comes down to having the has-built model, which have that level of details that is no longer concept, but has what you built, so that will form your basis for your maintenance, for your operations later on. And that's what we call in a constructible model that it can be used for construction, not just for concept, and also models that you can use to do your constructability analysis, as well as using it for all your planning for your construction, so that you will lead on to your final product, which is your has-built. Last but not least, they also mentioned about, in the two University of Singapore, there were already 2 BIM centers being set up, the Center of Excellence, and they would like them to have a roadmap and to help the industry to work with the public sector and the private sector to close the gap by having research program to study on how to effectively and efficiently transform those current processes to make it more efficient and more the building environment to be more efficient using BIM as a tool. So that this is all about transformation processes, and this is where I'm going to share with you just one or two. So we talked about just now about transforming the procurement processes or even the current operation processes, how to bring that information, how to bring that part of the constructability of that analysis up front, so that by the time you reach construction, you have that model already done up that can be used in design and through all the way to construction. So for that to happen, I guess okay, I have one slide missing. Okay, doesn't matter. All right, so for that to happen, actually, your model needs to be able to use from design. During design stage, your model should be able to not just be a concept model, design model. It has to be a construction model, so that the contractors or people who are looking at constructability analysis during the early part of design or during the design phase are able to do that part of the analysis. I'm sure that some of you have maybe already know this project. This is the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. I personally has not gone up there, and you can go to the casino. I need to pay $100, right? So I'm not thought about it yet. But anyway, the top part is actually one of the most talk about structures, in this region, and this was designed by Arup. So one of the things is that this is the comment by the BIM specialist by Arup. They actually use various kind of softwares to do their design, but eventually, because they still need to use it for their fabrication, so they need to communicate with the fabricator, example, and they had to collect all the different softwares and put into Tekla, and to accept information from a wide range of sources in Tekla. And because Tekla is actually open BIM, so they are able to bring all the information into Tekla, did their work coordination, and then did their drawings and fabrication drawing as well for the fabricator. So this brings me another point, which is open BIM, which is important because I don't believe that project is more complex and has more people work together. It doesn't matter what software you use, but everybody should be using formats that are able to work together, especially like open BIM, so that everybody has a chance to use the software that they want. But eventually, the right tools for the right job. But after they have done this, they found that, right, great, this is okay. I passed the things to the fabricator, but the fabricator still need time to work on the things. So for the later part of the project, when they start to do the convention center, they said, well, I want to cut down more time. I'm short of time. So the Arup took on the job of modeling learning the convention center, the steel structures in Tekla, and doing much of the engineering analysis and engineering and more the details like during the design phase with Tekla. And by the time they pass it to the fabricators could almost use it just to fine-tune it for fabrication purposes, and they are ready and they can collaborate together and get the project up and running, installation running much faster than the previous. So this is an example of bringing the engineering consultant, doing a larger part of that, doing the constructability studies, and using a model that can carry on from design all the way to construction, to fabrication construction. And this is an example of an MRT station in Singapore, whereby the contractor is SKENC. They were having a top-down, it's an underground station, and they were doing a top-down construction. And although they have done the the CSD, the combined services drawing, combining all the services, but they were not able to consider the reinforcement at the time. And when they tried to lay during the construction downwards, they had a hard time because they just couldn't fit in the services with the reinforcement as what was planned. So after first, they had a hard time for the first slab. They started to use Tekla to model the reinforcement as well, and then re-coordinate those services considering the reinforcement. Because the reinforcement is very dense, so when they put in the reinforcement, they need to they found that there's a lot of areas they could improve on. And that when they went down further down to the bottom slab, they could easily finish up their job faster. And this is the comment by the designer is that they have to, using that method, they have to produce the accurate rebar quantities at every part of the slab, and they can easily now understand the shop drawings. Of course, with the reinforcement there, they could actually easily now know which is not possible because the services may look okay, but when you put in the reinforcement, it's not all right anymore. So they could do the readjustment on the model, and then those information can, the reinforcement and the services can be done beforehand. And that really helped them save time for not only for the ranging, but ordering of the equipment, of the materials, so that the prefab and it comes correct, and it just lay according to what it has been designed and modeled, and that reduces the time taken to do all the manual hard work adjustment on site. But of course, this is just the beginning because they just started using this way, Tekla, for the coordination, and they're looking forward to other means of using it for their planning and for their organizing and their tracking of their work, reinforcements as well as their concrete, and for other parts of their work. So, which I believe that the next speaker, Mr. Andy Tekla, will share with you more about in US what are contractors, reinforced concrete contractors are using it for to better manage the construction process as well as the benefits of having a construction model and constructability, and using it to really get real benefits out from information. I would say maybe construction information modeling even from those projects. So this is my last slide. I thank you very much for the opportunity for me to share with you some of the things in Singapore, and I really look forward to learning from you about construction and BIM information as well. Last but not least, I just want to say that those things that it's a long path, and everybody is learning, and we are still learning, and I'm always open to new ideas on how to get better benefits from building information modeling. So, any question or answer now? So thank you very much. If there's any question or answer, I'll be pleased to answer them later on.
Vì thời gian thì cũng không có thể cho phép tôi kéo dài nhiều cái bài thuyết trình này, thì nếu quý vị nào có câu hỏi với các diễn giả đây, ta có thể ghi vào trong cái phiếu đó, và đến cuối chúng tôi sẽ tổng kết lại và sẽ trao đổi với các cái diễn giả ở đây. Thì tôi cũng chỉ xin là tóm tắt lại một chút về cái bài trình bày của ông Mark về các cái rào cản về trong trong quá trình triển khai BIM tại Singapore và cái chiến lược mà Singapore làm cách nào để thực hiện cái đó, để chúng ta có những cái kinh nghiệm để học tập. Đó là thiếu cái nhu cầu về BIM, nghĩa là như này, bây giờ là có nhiều đơn vị tư vấn muốn triển khai cái BIM này, nhưng mà hiện tại là chủ đầu tư chưa đặt ra cái yêu cầu đó, thì cái việc mà người ta đầu tư về đào tạo con người, đầu tư về công cụ thì chưa được trả công xứng đáng. Thì Singapore cái cách người ta giải quyết là đầu tiên là bắt đầu từ khu vực công, thứ hai là sẽ quy định ở trong luật. Thì những cái trình bày này tiến sĩ Hùng đã trình bày ngay từ đầu, tức là khu vực công người ta quy định từ tháng 7 năm 2012 là những dự án xây dựng trên 10 triệu đô là bắt buộc phải thiết kế dùng cái quy trình BIM. Thứ hai là cái rào cản về cái thói quen thiết kế 2D và cách thức chuyển từ thiết kế 2D sang cái thiết kế dùng quy trình BIM. Thì Ủy ban BCA đã đưa ra những cái tiêu chuẩn để trợ giúp cho các cái doanh nghiệp để triển khai BIM. Thì thông qua cái ban chỉ đạo về BIM, thì ở Việt Nam chúng ta có nhiều cái ban chỉ đạo, nhiều chương trình, đúng không ạ? Ban chỉ đạo về công nghệ thông tin, thì hiện nay thì cái ban chỉ đạo lớn nhất về công nghệ thông tin là Thủ tướng Chính phủ đứng đầu về ban chỉ đạo ứng dụng công nghệ thông tin tại Việt Nam. Thì tất nhiên đây là cái câu chuyện về ban chỉ đạo BIM, họ thành lập ra cái ban chỉ đạo BIM này với sự trợ giúp của các cái chuyên gia quốc tế về BIM. Họ mời các chuyên gia từ Mỹ, từ Anh sang để trợ giúp, cùng với các cái trung tâm về công nghệ thông tin trong xây dựng, và thành lập các nhóm làm việc về hướng dẫn về BIM, tạo ra các cái tài liệu về hợp đồng và các cái quy định rõ là trong nếu mà thực hiện BIM thì trong cái điều khoản hợp đồng sẽ phải như thế nào. Và cái thứ ba là cái nhóm làm việc về hiệp hội BIM Manager. Cái này tôi sẽ đi nhanh một chút. Và cái trở ngại thứ tư của BCA đó là thiếu nhân lực sử dụng BIM. Và hiện tại ở Việt Nam chúng ta cũng thấy nhiều doanh nghiệp muốn triển khai BIM nhưng mà thiếu nhân lực sẵn sàng để tiếp nhận cái công nghệ này. Thì người ta xây dựng cái năng lực và khả năng về BIM thông qua cách là các cái chương trình đào tạo. Ở đây chúng ta thấy là đào tạo cho hai đối tượng, là đào tạo cho nhóm sinh viên, và thứ hai là những cái kỹ sư hiện tại thông qua các cái chương trình này. Thì tôi cũng xin chia sẻ tại Việt Nam thì chúng tôi có phối hợp với năm 2013 thì có phối hợp với trường Đại học Giao thông Vận tải và trong thành phố Hồ Chí Minh và trường Đại học Xây dựng Hà Nội thì thành lập bước đầu thành lập các cái khóa đào tạo dành cho sinh viên căn bản về ứng dụng các cái phần mềm về BIM như là giải pháp của Tekla. Và hiện tại thì Singapore chúng ta thấy là có hơn 3.500 chuyên gia được đào tạo về BIM. Tất nhiên là trong cái khóa vừa rồi, trong năm vừa rồi chúng tôi cũng đào tạo được trên 100 sinh viên những bước đầu về ứng dụng trong một cái quy mô rất nhỏ thôi, là đào tạo về phần mềm ứng dụng BIM là cái Tekla BIM. Ở đây là một số cái trường đại học mà ở Singapore người ta đã đưa cái việc này vào rồi. Cái này tôi sẽ đi nhanh một chút. Và cuối cùng là những cái trở ngại, là tức là những cái người ta cần thêm những cái nguồn lực để xây dựng đội ngũ chuyên gia về BIM. Thì chính phủ đưa ra các biện pháp để khuyến khích áp dụng BIM thông qua người ta có một cái quỹ gọi là quỹ nâng cao năng lực và năng suất trong xây dựng. Cái quỹ này một phần trong 250 triệu là dành cho quỹ về BIM, chứ không phải tất cả 250 triệu đô. Cái con số này rất lớn, đúng không? Một phần trong cái quỹ đó mà người ta triển khai ở hai dạng. Thứ nhất là cho cấp độ doanh nghiệp và thứ hai là cấp độ về dự án. Người ta có những cái tiêu chí rõ ràng là cái doanh nghiệp nào đạt những đầu tư về công nghệ BIM, ví dụ người ta tài trợ lên đến 20.000 đô cho một cái ứng dụng, ở đây hiểu có thể là những cái giải pháp phần mềm. Và đây là cái kết quả mà Singapore đạt được với cái sự tích cực của chính phủ. Thì cái tỷ lệ áp dụng BIM đã tăng từ 20% từ năm 2009 lên đến 65% năm 2013. Và cái Ủy ban quốc tế của về IP họ đã nhận xét là cái lộ trình BIM của Singapore hiện tại là bước đầu đưa vào áp dụng. Tuy nhiên là người ta đưa cái khuyến cáo tiếp theo. Thì cái bước đầu đưa vào áp dụng thì chúng ta có thể là các doanh nghiệp, các tổ chức sử dụng BIM, nhưng cái tính vẫn còn cái bước tiếp theo là cái tính hợp tác giữa các cái khối doanh nghiệp này với nhau. Mà cái bước tiếp theo thì còn có những bước tiếp theo, đó là chuyển đổi cái quy trình. Ví dụ như ban đầu thì tiến sĩ Hùng có đề cập đến cái hình thức làm việc cộng tác đấy. IPD, tức là Integrated Project Delivery, tức là cái cách thức đấu thầu không phải là từ chủ đầu tư mà làm việc riêng rẽ với tư vấn, làm việc riêng rẽ với nhà thầu, mà người ta thành lập cái liên minh giữa các nhóm nhà thầu với tư vấn thiết kế để cùng đấu thầu, và cái hiệu quả từ đó sẽ được chia sẻ. Thì cái đó thì tiến sĩ Hùng đã chia sẻ từ ban đầu. Và cái BIM thì ứng dụng nó không chỉ trong cái giai đoạn thiết kế và xây dựng, thì cái mục đích tiếp theo là phục vụ cho cái vận hành của công trình, tức là sau khi hoàn công thì chúng ta chuyển giao cái mô hình BIM để sử dụng cho cái giai đoạn sau. Và cuối cùng là những cái chia sẻ về một số cái đánh giá về ứng dụng BIM, ở đây cụ thể là Tekla BIM. Thì ở đây có cái khái niệm mới là Open BIM, tức là cái khái niệm mà các bộ môn có thể sử dụng các giải pháp phần mềm khác nhau, miễn là các giải pháp đấy hướng tới một cái tiêu chí là phải chia sẻ được dữ liệu với nhau. Và cái này thì trong cái bài thuyết trình tiếp theo thì chúng ta sẽ đi chi tiết về cái nội dung về Tekla BIM cho nhà thầu xây dựng.